The offseason is simmering towards a boil, with the NFL Combine this past weekend leading into free agency. Joining me to discuss what's truly important about this part of the NFL calendar is former QB and current analyst Brock Huard. Let's light him up.
I'm Jacson and, and this is Cigar Thoughts.
Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jacson and, and along with my truculent producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. And look, this weekend highlighted one of the major steps along the transition from college football to the pros, and I couldn't be happier to sit down with someone who has been through the process himself. But before we get to that, I want to shout out two fantastic supporters of the show. Cigar Thoughts is proud to be partnered with Seattle Cigar Concierge and Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch Whiskey, two companies whose products I enjoy on a regular basis. And look, by now you know the deal. The Cigar Thoughts cigars are fantastic. I'm actually smoking one of the originals right now. And look, it's not just me saying so. The feedback on these stogies has been awesome, and you can get your own bundle of 10 for just $149 using the link on the show page or by going to cigarthoughtsnfl.com. They're an excellent way to kick back and enjoy, and they make a great gift for the cigar lover in your life. Mike and I love doing the show, and there are two ways y'all listening and watching can help support it so that we can keep these episodes coming. One is by purchasing the cigars, and the other is by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts, where you can watch full episodes as well as the funny and insightful clips that Mike puts together. Give a thumbs up to the stuff you like, and let us know what you think in the comments. And of course, you can listen to us everywhere you get your podcasts. Now, the Combine has become a landmark on the journey to the NFL, and its discourse typically surrounds 40 times, draft stock speculation, and the will they, won't they decisions from the top prospects. But it's also the backdrop for some of the biggest contract and trade discussions we'll see all year. That's why I'm thrilled to be joined by today's guest. After a sensational career as the quarterback of the Washington Huskies, he was taken in the third round of the 1999 NFL Draft. Since then, he's announced numerous college and NFL games, provided expert analysis on both levels, and become one of the prevailing voices in the Seattle sports scene. You also know him as the co-host of the Brock and Sock Show on 710 ESPN Radio. He is Brock Huard, and he is back in the Cigar Lounge. Brock, how you doing?
I am doing good. Thank you. And the very kind words. 26 years ago, the 1999 Combine. So now I'm 49. So I was over half a lifetime ago. Cannot believe it. And to see the spectacle it's become is just, I mean, it's extraordinary. Like, totally. Honestly, I joke around, and I gave away as a white elephant gift. The only thing I had left from the Combine was my T-shirt. And we had a white elephant among some very good friends. And I was like, and a couple of them were sporty guys. So I had a white elephant. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to throw my 1999. It felt like an old wool baseball uniform. It was champion made. It was ginormous. The neck on it was like almost, yeah, I mean, it was just it's so opposite of everything you see today. And,
you weren't in the spandex and the boxer briefs?
No, terrible champion gear. I remember getting to the hotel room and there was a duffel bag with it, size for you, and open it up. And at the time I thought, wow, this is pretty cool stuff. But even then I'm like, golly, mismatched. This must have been the reject material from Champion. I mean, it just, did not feel good. I did not look good. I did not perform good, especially running the 40 time. But it is a pretty darn big deal.
Yeah. Well, and while I've got you, I'm excited to get your thoughts on a number of things, including the recent NFLPA report cards, the eventual post-Geno Smith plan at quarterback in Seattle, and some other things as well. But you mentioned it. I mean, we just had the NFL's annual meat market in Indianapolis this weekend. And as you said, you went through that process 26 years ago. You alluded to it a little bit, that it's so much different now. But I'm sure there's a lot of things that are still the same. What was that experience like? How nervous were you? How big of a deal was it then? And then, what's one or two of the biggest differences between your combine experience and what these guys are going through now?
Yeah, it's funny, Jackson, I can kind of close my eyes and remember a lot of things. Meeting with Andy Reid, meeting with Sean Payton, meeting with the Seahawks, Mike Holmgren and the contingent. And I can vividly remember all those things in the different hotel rooms. I also vividly remember all of the physicals, the hamstring quad test, the MRI, the X-rays, and I had like a really hard decision to make because my back even then was a little stiff and a little problematic, and I knew that, but I didn't obviously want any future employers to know that, and they were like, "Well, we're going to send you for an MRI on your back." And I remember calling my agent Marvin Demoff, and I was walking the hotel hallway, and I'm like, "Marvin, I don't want to do this," and he's like, "Then don't." I'm like, well, then what is that going to look like? Is that going to be, like a red mark, a red flag? Like, I don't really want to know what's going on with my back. B, I certainly, if I got herniated discs and fractures and bone spurs, which I ultimately had even, into my career, like I don't want people to know that. So that was like a big, one of those first turning point, being an amateur, being told what to do. And now I'm going to try to be a professional, and I got a little voice in what I'm going to do. And I remember not doing that. And I think that benefited me, to be quite honest, because I think I'd have been further flagged injury wise had I done that. So no, I remember all of it. I wasn't nervous when we actually got to the throwing part. I was kind of excited about that and the agility stuff and the vertical, a bunch of things I really trained for and I felt pretty good about. And I think that's kind of what I feel with these guys too. They spend so much time over the last month, depending on when their seasons ended, getting ready for that by the time they get to that moment, they get to that interview, they get to that drill, they've done it hundreds of times, and then you just go cut it loose. And I thought we saw a bunch of that over this weekend.
Yeah. How much are these guys leaning on their agents during this process?
A lot.
Because the agent's been through this with hundreds of players, most of them, right?
Correct. So a ton. They lean into their training facilities. I know our buddy Jake Heaps was training Will Huard and others, and they know exactly what's coming. They know exactly what these drills are going to look like. They honestly, and they know a lot of what the interviews are going to look like in the way it's going to go and how you want to, handle that and present yourself. So there really is an immense amount of training from when their season ends. Some of them a little bit later this year in college football, my gosh, with the 12-team playoff, it ended, mid-January. So not as much time for some of those Ohio State and others, but most of them have had plenty of time to get themselves ready. And the numbers speak to that. I mean, some of these athletes and some of the holy cow, just the off the charts testing in every position group, the safety from South Carolina, the receiver from Iowa State, Mimbu, the big, and Campbell, the big two linemen from Mizzou and LSU respectively, Shamar Stewart there at A&M. I mean, just off the charts, just not human, not normal, incredibly, incredibly physically gifted guys.
Yeah. I mean, it is wild. And the combine has a way of kind of reducing me back to being a little kid back when there was this idol worship of these players. And
sure.
So much of that has been stripped. One, because you get older, you get a little bit more cynical, but sports media coverage has also changed a lot. Everything is debatable now, right? Everything is an argument now. And too often those discussions center around what players can't do or haven't done or whatever. But when you're just watching these kids go out there looking like Avengers, it's just like, it reminds me of just the awe that I had for these professional athletes growing up. And I think that part is very, very cool. And, you mentioned the testing, and I think, as we as a whole become smarter, more informed football fans, we realize 40 time isn't everything, but it's still the headline maker, right? It's still the marquee event. But when it comes to the full spectrum of activities, I'm talking the testing, the drills, the interviews, press conferences, which aspects do you believe are the most important for NFL teams when they're evaluating these guys?
Yeah, John was asked that the other day on with Wyman and Bob, the John Schneider show, which I thought John was really good this last week in particular. He was kind of locked in his hotel room and had his glasses on, and you could tell he is just in the midst of it, man. The Combine is the engine that drives so much of the offseason and meeting with agents and meeting with other personnel. And I just thought he was so dialed in. He was kind of asked that, and I do think it's position specific, right? It's not one thing is most important for every position. Some of the bend and the movement skills with linemen, the explosiveness, right? That vertical jump and that broad jump, like, wow, to see some of those guys, kid out of North Dakota State, Gray Zabel, jump 36 and a half at 6'6", 310. I mean, and then you see that, like, that's why he's able to do on the field, movement wise and fluidity wise, some of what he's able to do. Why these guys can go up at high point and run by people. Well, it's because they jump 41 inches at receiver and they run 4.29. Like, it just kind of shows up. And when people say to me all the time, 40 doesn't matter. Well, what's the difference between a 4.4 and a 4.6? Well, you tell me on a football field what the difference of one step is. Tell me for an outfielder in the outfield how many times one step makes a difference. And that's really what you're gauging with this. Like, there's a 4.4 guy, there's a 4.6 guy, there's a 4.8 guy, and then there's all the 5 flat can't run guys, right? I mean, it just kind of puts you in those silos. And then when you get the extraordinary, low 4.3s or 4.29, like, that's just different. And it should express itself on a field. There should be more separation. So then you got to see and make sure, that track speed correlates to football speed. That little receiver at Iowa State, Jalen Noel, love him.
Yeah.
Saw him probably, oh my gosh. And I probably saw him in Iowa State the last 4 or 5 years of his career. I bet I saw that guy. I remember him as a true freshman playing. He's out of Kansas City. They loved him then. He was a quarterback. He just kind of got this like Doug Baldwin body control. And then I watched him grow and watched him get stronger and watched him get stronger. And then to see him just put on an absolute display over the weekend, wins the bench press, wins the vertical jump, wins the broad jump, runs 4.39. Like, yeah, that's a dude whose measurables in tape or, physical measurables then just kind of coalesce with the tape. And you're like, yep, that's the kind of guy I want on my team.
Yeah. I mean, and these guys can make themselves a lot of money this weekend.
Yep.
Because, Noel was kind of one of my favorite. I'm so glad you mentioned him. He's one of my favorite kind of sleeper prospects. He's not a sleeper anymore.
Nope.
And
nope.
It was cool to see him test. He tested much better than I thought he would. I didn't think he'd test poorly. I didn't think he'd blow the roof off the combine. But when you watch him, you mentioned different things matter for different positions. One of the things that I look for the most, the two things I look for the most with wide receivers aren't straight line speed. It's how quickly can you create separation, and do you have to change your stride to catch the ball? And Jalen Noel doesn't change his stride one bit. He is so good at timing his steps where he is staying on his route if the ball is thrown well. He's never slowing down. He's never chopping his steps. And when you combine that with what you see from more of the track atmosphere, it gets really exciting. My question to you is, and a lot of people say, how important is really the 40-yard dash? How often are guys running 40 yards in a straight line? Maybe it's a little bit outdated, but the reason they don't change any of these things is they want to be able to compare to historical precedent. They need to see what percentile these guys are landing in. My question to you is, do you think NFL teams would benefit from having these guys do all the drills in their pads?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, those pads now, though, again, back to the 1990s when the pads were just gigantic, right? Yeah, like John L. Williams in the 90s with his neck roll.
Neck roll.
He's got like a battleship for shoulder pads. And like you just, they look
like Transformers out there, man.
Yes. Yeah. And I think one of the first guys that I saw, Jackson, that was like, whoa, he's wearing almost no pads was Chad Brown. You remember Chad Brown?
I sure do.
Chad would like shower before the game. He just kind of wanted to be clean. And I don't think he put like a little plastic template in for thigh pads, and all he wore were shoulder pads, no tape, no anything else, like shoulder pads and helmet. And he was so just kind of streamlined in that way then. And that's more and more of it now. Like the gear you wear is really not particularly heavy. Your pants are so, the fabric. I mean, everything is just best of the best. So I don't think it's as big a deal now as it would have been even 10, 15, 20 years ago in that regard.
Sure.
And I do think that 40 time, to your point, matters from a historical perspective because you see the difference. I remember when I got drafted, right? So I did all this training. I was on creatine. I was trying to be as strong as I could be, as fast as I could be, as explosive as I could be. And the advantage for me was I get drafted, whatever it was, in late April. And we had OTAs at that time and mini camps full on, like full go. And Mike Holmgren decided, as he was new to the Seahawks, I'm going to put the whole team through a combine. I want Cortez Kennedy and Sam Adams and Michael Sinclair. I want to see what I'm inheriting. So that first OTA, we did a full-on another combine with the bench press, with the vertical, with the 40. And I got to watch like a lot of my teammates do this, and it was amazing. Like we had a guy named James McKnight, second fastest receiver, really fast.
I remember.
And he was like 4.45. He could really run. And then all of a sudden, Joey Galloway ran, and the whole place stopped. Seriously, everybody stopped. Everybody stopped whatever they were doing.
People forget what an absolute freak Joey Galloway was. Didn't he have like well over a 300-pound bench press too? I mean, he was.
He would put 275 on his back, and he would walking lunge in the weight room.
Criminy.
Walking lunge with 275, 2 plates, 25. Like, yeah, he was. And I remember watching that, going, okay, so that's just different. Like his feet didn't hit the ground. It was all handheld. But he was in the 4.2s.
Yep.
High 4.1s handheld. Like it was just, it was different. And that's what that 40 and that all that testing does, is it really does express who is just genetically and significantly physically different than their peers.
Right. Again, so much of this conversation around this past weekend is about what happens on the field, but the biggest subplot of Combine Week is that it's the only time all year when every front office in the league is in the same place at the same time. And so as a result, when the cameras are off, lots of deals, or at least the framework of deals, get done over drinks and on the back of restaurant napkins, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's no debate about that. It is, it's go time. It is. So the legal tampering period, as you and I are talking here on early March, legal tampering period begins March 10th. This upcoming week here, before that, the Seahawks will make a bunch of moves with their veteran guys to get under the cap. The Robertson Harrises, the Lockett's, these guys that are going to, just at the age and stage of their careers, and their numbers are going to get moved on from to free up other space. And this is where the framework of a lot of deals. This is the first time, agent to GM, eyeball to eyeball, like this is what we're thinking. Can we find some reasonable ground here for a Geno Smith in particular? That's the biggest domino for the Seahawks, and then the kind of rest will start to fall off. This is where they start to gauge, what your team needs really are. Can we find a way to help one another? John is a real deal maker. He's got tremendous touch point relationship with everybody in this league, and there's a lot of young GMs. That kid out of Jacksonville, I couldn't believe it. He looks younger than you, dude. What are you? What are you rocking? Are you 30, 35? What are you?
Oh, Brock, I need to have you on more often, buddy. I'm 41 years old.
Okay, yeah. Well, that kid's like 35, and he looks like he's 19. Can you imagine Schneider looking at him like, what in the
freaking
world?
Doogie Howser out there. It's nuts. Well, and that was going to be my next question, because, I do think for all of the pros and cons, the strengths and weaknesses that John Schneider has as a general manager, I do think this is where he excels. And I mean, look no further than the Russell Wilson deal that was done at 1 a.m, right at the Combine. And so, how big of an advantage is it for a 10-year GM like a John Schneider, a Les Snead, a Howie Roseman over some of these other guys that are just getting into it?
Yeah, and I think you felt that last year, in particular, the GM Fontenot at Atlanta. I think the things just sped up on him on draft day, right? I mean, that's what experience, you hope, does, is just kind of slows you down.
Well, and you got to answer to a billionaire with all this stuff too, right?
That's right. Yeah, you do. And so can you kind of process, and, I like to use the term institutional knowledge. There's just a institutional knowledge of all those men and GMs that you referenced there, of so much background. I think the continuity the Seahawks had was so much of their personnel department, as you said, for better or in some places, some real struggle with the offensive line in particular. That's just been a real bugaboo for a bunch of years. And hopefully Mike McDonald and Clint Kubiak and all the resources and all the men and all the wisdom and all the institutional knowledge they brought in for this kind of style to know exactly the kind of players and personnel they want, both free agency and draft, will finally solve that riddle that has been just a bit of an issue over the years.
Yeah, yeah. And look, while I have you, I do want to get some thoughts on Mike Macdonald's first season in Seattle. But as someone who has been on NFL teams and who covers the league closely, I got to ask you about these NFL Player Association report cards that just came out. and for those listening who don't know, it's an anonymous poll of NFL players where they're asked to grade their own franchise on a number of categories, from ownership to food, facilities, even treatment of families. And the Seahawks graded pretty well in most categories, but still ranked 15th overall. What's your impression of how this particular team handles its business, and were you surprised by where Seattle landed in those rankings?
Yeah, I've always felt, and maybe a little biased because I'm around that facility a fair amount, that, man, you have every resource available. And Pete Carroll was really at the forefront of that with John Schneider when they started this thing, and Paul Allen's, money and backing, and we want to give you every opportunity, every resource, every tool, from the science and technology department. They were at the tip of the spear in the NFL, 10, 15 years ago, with sleep studies and nutrition and what they were going to do, to, creating and cultivating a place where guys want to be. When I was there in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were up at Northwest College. It was a small little building, and it was fine. It's just what you know. But by contrast of, are you kidding me? This is a place that I want to be. I want to eat and look out to the lake. I want to have a player's lounge that has every amenity possible. I want it to be a spot, and you see this in different business, right? Especially the technology business. They try to cultivate places where people want to be. And I think they've done a remarkable job of that. Now, is it starting to get a little bit outdated next to the Cowboys and the Vikings' new facility? And I think the Dolphins rated really high. Maybe. Will they put the money into fixing that? Yes. I think they're really committed to that. So, yeah, I think it is still, from a resource standpoint, I know they ended up 15th this year in the overall rankings. I think resource standpoint, ownership standpoint, taking care of their players and family standpoint, certainly one of the 10 best in the league.
Yeah, I'm gonna just real quick read off how they graded in each category and get your thoughts on what stands out to you the most. But before I do, how much do you think ownership pays attention to these report cards?
Oh, a lot. Yep.
Okay.
I think they do a lot.
Okay.
I think Chuck Arnold, the president, probably more than like a Jody Allen, but for the president on that side of it, very much so. In fact, I think where they rated a little bit low the previous year, they put a bunch of money into, I think that was on the family end of things,
yes,
and upgraded that. Yep. And now they rank a little bit low because these guys, Jackson, when they come out of LSU and Alabama and Tennessee and Michigan, they got 8 hot tubs and cold tubs, and now I get to the NFL and I got 2. Yes.
Yeah.
So the training centers and a bunch of these colleges, have probably, created some of this with these NFL teams. Certainly the teams like Cincinnati and Arizona that ranked at the bottom, most of the players there came out of prominent college programs that are like, why am I going to the NFL and stepping back in these training facilities? So, no, they definitely listen. They definitely respond. And I think we'll probably are going to build some new hot tubs and cold tubs and expand some of that training room that got the lower grades.
Yeah, because, I mean, money and fit and championship potential are probably the major players for top-end free agents figuring out where they want to go. But this stuff plays into that too. There's real business sense in, providing the best treatment of players that you can. And so I'm actually going to start there. I'm going to go in order that the NFLPA website has these categories in, and I'm just going to read off the grades. Yep. You tell me what stands out to you the most. So treatment of families is where they saw the biggest improvement. They were an A-. When it came to the food and the dining area, they were a B. Same for nutritionist, dietitian. Locker room, B+. Training room, a C. Training staff, B-. Weight room, a B. Strength coaches, A-. Team travel, A-. Head coach was their highest grade with an A, and ownership was C+.
Yeah. So I think a couple things jump out there on that grading sheet. Awesome that Mike Macdonald was an A+. I know we'll get to the Seahawks in the season ago before looking ahead. That's a home run. I mean, coming off of Pete Carroll, I don't know about you and what you said on your airwaves, but man, those are big shoes to follow. A lot of times you don't want to be the one that follows the legend. You want to be the one that followed the legend second in line there. So for that to be a home run, coming off of Pete Carroll, who was consistently an A on that grade sheet as well, that's a big deal. Yeah. I don't know how in the world that's a B for food. I mean, if you've ever been in that cafeteria, been there on draft day, A, the food's phenomenal. B, you're sitting right on top of Lake Washington. D, it's a huge kitchen and cafeteria. Like, I don't know how that's not an A. That feels a little rough for me, as is a weight room, which opens up right to the practice fields, which is enormous and has every state-of-the-art thing you could ever imagine. So I don't know how you nitpick, other than I guess these guys come out of school and maybe some of the training tables and some of the size of these weight rooms are so massive and palatial, but I don't know. To me, those feel a little bit low.
Yeah. Well, look, I know how precious your time is, and again, super grateful to you for carving out some of it to be here. So I want to bundle my final thoughts kind of into one here. We're a couple months removed from the end of the Seahawks season. So I want to know, what are your thoughts on it from are they headed in the right direction standpoint? And if you were a high-ranking member of the Seahawks Brain Trust, what would you be prioritizing?
Okay. Right direction. You win 10 games in a rookie year. I don't care who you played, when you played, how it all went. 10 wins is a rookie head coach and a first-time ever head coach, I think, is a feather in the cap of Mike McDonald. Yeah, we're not in the habit of devaluing NFL wins around here. I don't know how you could be, how anybody could be. So especially year number one. Number two, to watch the growth and the development of that defense and what they became in the second half of the season, and to see them just cut it loose and to let it rip, and to see Leonard the best that Leonard has been, and see Julian the best that Julian has been, and to see a fourth-round linebacker from UTEP step in and Tyrese Knight play really good football, meaningful football. Mafe and Derek Hall, the best they've been in their career. To me, that if I'm front office or I'm on the administrative executive side, that gets me really excited. That buy-in, that identity, who they became defensively, that was foundational. We didn't see that offensively. Right. I don't think DK had the best year of his career. I don't think Tyler had the best year of his career. I don't think K9 had the best year of his career. I think Charles Cross did, but Geno, I don't even think he had the best year of his career. So, across those lines, we didn't see it on that side, nor did we see an identity built. And every week, especially in the second half of the year, Jackson, that's where I came back to, like, what are you? What are you on offense? What identity are you? And I think that was really hard for Grubb in year number one, first time in the NFL to achieve that. And therefore you go out and you get somebody that's really identifiable with what he wants to do, how he wants to play, how he's going to call it, surround himself with his QB coach, his O-line coach, his run game coordinator, all speaking that same language. So super encouraging defensively. Offensively, a lot of room for improvement, and that's, I think, the moves they made in the offseason, coaching staff-wise, to try to streamline and solidify that and make sure complementary-wise your offense matches identity with what your defense certainly built in the second half of the season.
I look at the NFC West, and it seemed like the 49ers were just going to be entrenched at the top for a few more years, and maybe they get this thing back on track, but they're very fluid right now. They're coming off a terrible season and are being forced to make really difficult contractual decisions this offseason. We already seen them trade Deebo Samuel. They're floating Brandon Ayuk out there. They've got a big decision coming up with Brock Purdy, of course.
Yep.
You've got the Rams are also very transitional, moving on from Cooper Kupp. They're still, I mean, they kicked the can on Matt Stafford, but that's coming up. The Cardinals are feisty and have a massive war chest of cap space and draft picks. Yep. I mention all this just to highlight how fluid I think this division is. And am I wrong in thinking that this team is a league average offensive line away from being the division champion?
No, I don't think that's wrong. And you're not in a division with Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton and Pete Carroll and Andy Reid and that AFC West. You're not in a division, with, just Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts as young, really cornerstone franchise guys there in the NFC East. There is, I think, a bunch of fluidity. I love Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's gotten the most out of anything that he was given in life. But if San Francisco is going to commit 50 or $60 million to Brock Purdy, that's a huge win to me for the Seahawks.
I agree.
Because I don't think he is a and elevate everybody else around him. I think he's a wonderful facilitator and point guard when he's got everybody to distribute to. But to me, that could really, change that dynamic. Kyler Murray has been totally up and down, very volatile. That's a dysfunctional organization at the very top. So,
yes.
No, I think you're I think you're a few pieces. I'd like to see them sign Dahlman at center, this being the Seahawks. I'd like for them to draft one of these freak shows that's going to fall to them at 18. At offensive guard, be it the kid from Ohio State or Membu, or I really like Booker at Alabama. I've heard nothing but wonderful things about him. So you get me Dahlman, you get me Booker, and let's go. And obviously you need a healthy Abe Lucas, but that starts to feel like let's go put the ball down and let's go play, and let's complement what we did defensively with a very physical run game and play action game, and not have Geno do so much. Just take the volume off of him, some of the pressure off of him. Go be a run play action guy that I think he can do at a very high level, and this thing should be spinning much more optimistically next season.
Yeah. And you mentioned Geno, of course, until the team and he and his agent come to terms or not, it's going to remain the biggest conversation surrounding this team. And I don't want to litigate whether we think Geno Smith should be the quarterback or not. What I do want to talk to you about, because that's been beaten to death and everyone listening knows where I stand on this. At some point, you need that contingency plan. And, if you want to move on from Geno, I've kind of been painted into this corner where people think that I think Geno is elite. I don't. I think that he's very good. And I think it's very easy to say, well, you have to get better at quarterback. It's much more difficult to chart out a path towards getting better than what I believe is the top 12 quarterback in the NFL, which means top 12 on the planet. Like, we really need to understand the scope of what having an above average quarterback looks like. You know this better than anyone. So my question to you is the post Geno quarterback available this year, whether it's through the draft, free agency, trade?
It doesn't feel that way. I think I would project next year's class of having a few more uniquely gifted guys. And I think that's a lot of what John Schneider has always looked at that position, and why he's drafted almost nobody other than Mr. Magoo in the late rounds. Like, I want somebody that's got some stuff that like when it walks in, and John and Pete use that word a ton. Feel. Mike McDonald's starting to do it. Like, I feel it. And I think next year, the class of 2026 is going to have more guys. You're like, ooh, I feel that talent. Ooh, I feel that's different. In this class, I'd keep an eye on two. I'd keep an eye on Shuck, and I'd keep an eye on Jackson Dart. I think the Seahawks will be all over their private workouts. I know they talk to them in their interview periods. I'll be curious if they fly them out. I would think quite possibly that you'd want to see them in your own building. But I think those would be kind of the two that I'd keep an eye on. The other one coming out of the Combine is some of these rumblings that Shedeur may tumble. And that one could be kind of unique too. Actually, Geno and Shedeur share a lot in common as throwers. They throw a beautiful ball. They're very, very accurate. I think they're tough as hell and don't get credit for that, for the beatings that they take, that Geno has taken, the last 3 years, and certainly that Shedeur took the last 2 seasons. So he would be kind of the one wild card, Jackson, over the next month, to kind of interesting where we could see this thing go. But Dart and Shuck, I think, are going to be fighting to be the third QB drafted. And if there is that guy for Seattle as a long-term play, those would be the two most intriguing.
Yeah. To me, I just feel like if you can get Geno under contract at a number that works for this team, having him for 2 more years is just fine by me. And then next year you can go get that guy understudy for a year, which, I mean, I think we're starting to see NFL teams circle back to the idea that you don't need to start your future quarterback in year one. And, unless it's a Joe Burrow or a CJ Stroud type of player. Last question for you. This pops up this time of year, every single year. It will for as long as he's a Seahawk. I know you and Mike have given lots of oxygen to this. DK Metcalf, one, are you even considering entertaining a trade for him? And if so, what does that package have to look like?
Yeah, I'm listening. I'm listening simply, and it had nothing to do with DK, the talent. I know Mike has said that a gazillion times, but people don't want to hear it. It's always, if you're even entertaining or thinking about it, you don't love him, you don't think he's the greatest, you understand what he brings to the table. And it's like, no, yes. It's like these Mariners in the trade market. Like, do I want to trade Logan Gilbert or Luis Castillo? No. When I'm around them, do I ever want to trade them? No. They're unbelievable guys. But, if you're going to get like a return, you've got to give something of significant meaning. And that's why you entertain it. It'd have to be a first. If you're saying like push comes to shove, well, what do you want for DK? In this draft, it would have to be a first. Yeah. Anything less than that, I'm just not even having the conversation.
Yeah.
If we have a first round pick in this upcoming April draft, and this has a lot more to do with DK being 27, 28 in the fall, has a lot more to do with DK going in the final year of his deal and how reasonable is he? Mm-hmm. Is he wanting $30 million? Is he going to play that card? What does all of that look like? All Jacson stuff that you and I are not privy to, right. Because the Seahawks hold those cards really, really close. As close as any organization does. Yeah. And just like they showed with the Russell Wilson deal, you won't know until Jay Glazer or Adam Schefter or Tom Pelissaro break it. And I won't know, and nobody will know. So that would be the only conversation. If it's not a one, then we're not even going to have that conversation.
I will say the emergence of Jacson Smith-Njigba becoming what I thought he was going to be makes that conversation maybe a little easier to stomach, but I just look at a team that is ready to win this division now. Yep. And I don't know that creating a hole in your roster with arguably your most with your most physically talented player is necessarily the right move. So I would need to feel like that first round pick gives me a chance at a pretty immediate difference maker.
That's right. Like the Justin Hollander, the Mariners GM, was on with us last week when we were in Peoria, and I thought put it pretty simple. It's just like basic kind of math. Here's the equal sign. And on this side of it, if we're giving away this, right, and if it's Logan or Luis or one of these guys, what we're giving away, it's some significant wins. Then I better get on the other side of that equal sign, not an unknown, right? Mm-hmm. I better be getting back some significant wins. And with DK, to your point, you get rid of them, you're giving up significant size, significant strength, significant presence that benefited everybody, including JSN, and took a lot of the burden off him. So what am I going to get back on that other side of the equal sign? It better be equal and equitable.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, this has been awesome. I've been looking forward to it for weeks. I appreciate so much you taking the time after your show to come give some insight to me and to my listeners. So thank you very, very much.
Did you say 31 or 41? How old did you say?
41. I'm 41.
You don't look it, man. You don't look it. Young and sprung.
I appreciate it, man. I got to hang on to this as long as I can because the cliff's going to be steep. I just got a feeling. Well, look, man, I hope you've got a tea time this afternoon. But before we go, let anyone listening who may not know where they can find more of you and your work.
Well, you can tune into Salky and I, man. 16 years, in fact, this week that we started the station in the spring of 2009. He left me for sabbatical for a little bit. We still love it. I mean, we really do. And being together with him in Arizona last week and our whole crew is just awesome. And a number of times he and I looked at each other like, this is still so much fun. And these drafts and this season is so much fun. And roster construction is so much fun. So the Brock and Salk Show every single morning, 6 to 10 on Seattle Sports. You can find us at Brock Huard on Twitter. We'll post some stuff. And I think this week we'll have some things to react to. The Seahawks are going to make some moves, some transactions. Mm-hmm. Some veterans are going to be cut. Hopefully the Geno deal gets done. And that just gets the whole engine revving for the offseason.
Yeah. Well, the fun you guys have definitely comes through, and it's great listening to you guys. I know your show informs a lot of the opinions that I have too. So really appreciate the work you guys do.
You got it, pal. Keep up the great work yourself, Jacson. See you, man.
Once again, a huge thank you to Brock for coming on. Really, really appreciate his insight, not only as an analyst, but as someone who has lived this process. So feel very, very grateful to have gotten about an hour of his time. As always, you can find Mike and I on social media. I am on Twitter and Blue Sky at Jacson&. That's Jacson. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on both at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts on Twitter and at CigarThoughtsNFL.com on Blue Sky. You can catch full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts and find the rest of our socials at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. As mentioned previously, this episode is brought to you by Glenfiddich Premium Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Y'all know I'm a huge fan of their lineup, and we are thrilled to have them on board as a sponsor of the show. One of the great things about a great Scotch is how well it plays with a good cigar. So once again, we do have our own special release of cigars that you can purchase at a terrific price as a listener of the show. The release of these Cigar Thoughts Stogies has been successful enough for us to continue offering them for the low price of $149. That's right, just $149 for a bundle of 10. As many of you know, we partnered with one of the most prestigious cigar manufacturers in the world to release these official Cigar Thoughts cigars, which you can order directly from cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Just follow the link on the show page to get these easy-to-smoke stogies rolled with 13-year aged premium Dominican tobacco leaf, or hit us up on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. We'll send you the details directly. The cigars come with a Boveda humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag to make sure they stay fresh, whether you have a humidor or not. Of course, you can listen to this show on fieldgoals.com, and if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of the show. We know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it is an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing this show on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making it happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.